Okay. Why are things acting up? Always gotta act up when I'm trying to do something. Can never just be smooth. Finally. Hey. All right. We have things falling down. And there it is. Alrighty. Righty. Well, things are properly situated. Got ourselves some progress to be done. Made this swatch last time. Helps me remember colors. Is a great way to test colors. This is going to be some actual application over some Mr. Surfacer. Now, being lacquer paint, I'm going to wear this little guy right here. So, muffled voice probably incoming, but it's okay. I'll make do. So, it's been determined, neutral gray 1, which is this guy right here. Neutral gray 1, that's the main color. That's going to go over everything. Well, everything that's going to be very so the hand itself won't be getting the color, but the rest of the arm will. That type of stuff. I'll also be doing the standard size shadow cat alongside it a little bit, because, you know, why not? I'm going to use some T07 here to thin it down, help it be a bit better. Totally paintbrushable, which is why I'm doing it this way, not spraying it. Definitely want to spray this stuff in a spray booth, but there's just fumes and stuff in general, which is why I want to wear a mask. So keep that in mind when you use this stuff, if you're going to use any lacquer based paints. The big draw to lacquer, it's a really strong finish, and it's sandable if I need to correct a mistake without necessarily ruining the progress and having to redo a lot. It also can be made quite thin, and in this case, Gaia notes and things like Mr. Color and other lacquer paints that are out there from different companies can be brushed by hand. Things like Alclad 2s, I haven't had any luck with personally doing that. The way they're formulated, I think even says it on their website. I was just experimenting, but this stuff, for example, is a gloss black base from Alclad 2. That stuff is something I want to airbrush, but we're not dealing with that. I'm gonna get the mask ready, so once I start proper, I can put it on and then take it off if I gotta make clear thoughts, if that makes any sense. Not the best paints for doing stuff like this, but it's the type of paints I want to use for this project. So that's what I'm doing, and here we are. Mask acquired. So we can move the swatch out of the way. This again is just the surfacer and then different paint colors. So we have the paint, we have the thinner, we have what is going to go in. I'm going to put some thinner in there first. I have little pipettes. You can get these, they're disposable. I got a big old bag of them. Pretty cheap. That's a good way to go ahead and apply said colors or thinners or whatever. Not apply, but take them and transfer, if we're going to use technical terms. So we'll get some of the thinner. Now, I'm not exactly sure how much I want to go with. I got a lot of ground to cover. That's kind of a lot of thinner, to be honest with you. What I'm doing, take some back as I can. Yeah. I'm winging it. Now this is paint that's pretty thick in here, purposefully. It's really meant to be thin. You can still shake it. It's, I guess, thick for lacquers. So I'm gonna get this, well, working right, because I just messed it all up with this mask. There we go. So I'm gonna get that put on. I'll answer questions and do some talking or whatever if there's any questions to be had, but it's gonna be muffled sounding, so I'll speak up, but that's part of the fun, right? Because I'm gonna sound like this. It's like I'm Bane. Alrighty, so if you're super worried, you can wear gloves. It's not necessary. I use this to mix it, just to give it a good thorough mix. You want to be careful you don't spray it everywhere, which is something I'm probably going to do by accident. let's mix it up. We'll put this in here and kind of use the thinner to clean up the mixing a little bit. And already I can tell it's going to be gray like I want because I did the swatch already. Put this to the side. But it's going to look grayer out of the pot. In the pot it looks kind of white. So get some, apply some, and see what happens. Not really sure the thickness I'm going for, but we'll just test it out on some easier to conceal spots. Get a good thickness going and consistency of coverage. Might want more paint on that, or in that mix. Really rather thin. I don't know the ratios, and I just used the wrong pipette. So I have to get another one out if I want to get more thinner in here. It's what you do, though. So, nothing wrong with it being a little thinner than I want. It's kind of hard to see it. I'll bring it up a little bit once it's mixed. But you can see it's somewhat gray in there. It's kind of shiny because it's wet, so it's hard to show. But with the thinner, this is self-leveling thinner, and with the kind of nature of acrylics, you don't need a lot of brush strokes to do things. Where you see the color kind of coming through. That's okay. I want to be more careful here than I have been. Mostly because, well, I don't want to gunk things up. This is going to be the showing color, the focal point color, if you will, on the dude. So I don't want to get it streaky. It should thin or level itself out decently enough. And I can come back in with another coat and kind of do this like the, it's not quite a tacky coat. Also not how most people would apply lacquers. But you can, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it like this. It's to show that you don't need fancy setups. You can just get some mask and throw some paint down. So the barrel is not going to be the gray either, so I'm going to use that as a handhold. Gloves would be preferable, but my hands are pretty dried out. We don't want to kind of contaminate the surface. Now, I am still very much new to lacquer paints in comparison to other mediums of paint. But don't let that stop you. Be sure to experiment. Or else, how do you grow, right? This is meant to be a fun kind of passion project thing. It has no bearing to do anything. It's not for a tournament. It's not for a competition. It has no real use, aside from looking cool. So I don't mind if I mess things up and have to get in there and redo stuff. There's no deadline. So we can afford to experiment and have some bobbling along the way. It's no big thing. So this little guy is going to be a little bit more liberally applied, only because I don't have quite the big surface. I know this is pretty thin. I'm not too worried about that. I also don't have them on a holder, so I'm going to do it in sections. But the idea here is to coat a little bit more than what I want in case I want to do some type of effect. So I do want the barrel on the Gauss to be, and yeah, just kind of putting the paint on them. As you do. And I did kind of glob it on, not glob it, but I was a little heavy-handed here, but it should be fine. I'm not too worried about that aspect of the paint. I did mix up a lot of paint here, so we'll keep that in mind. I'll work on the leg a little bit, like a little leg shot. Anyway, we have to just trust in the paint to not gunk up stuff. I'm also not jabbing it in there. I'm kind of spraying it across, letting the paint do its thing. It's a little bit different from acrylics. I found with acrylics, you gotta, massage the paint more where you want it and how you want it. With lacquers, you kind of let the thinner and the paint do its thing without being too present in the moment for it. These dry a lot faster out of the airbrush, but they still work pretty well out with the paintbrush. The airbrush is definitely the ideal method, I feel. So I'm going to make some pretty decent progress here. And then off camera, at a later date, prior to the next one, I'll finish up with an airbrush. Just so you're not watching me do the same thing 17 million times in a row. Should you watch this at a later date, or be here now. The main advantage I feel with the airbrush is that I'm not going to get things into these more delicate panel lines as much. We can still make it work. I'm not too worried, but there is definitely advantages to airbrushing, especially with paints like this, because they can provide a real nice, smooth finish in short order out of an airbrush. But I just want to do certain sections and let it dry to test things out. You got to test things out. And to get a feel for the tackiness of the paint, how it dries. Like, that's not, more than one coat is always going to give you a better coverage when it's thinned down. So that's what I'm doing here. Just testing out the properties with the brush, how smooth of a feel you're going to get. We don't want streaky, but we also want it to not just be super thick and obscuring. And one of the ways you can definitely obscure streakiness is to kind of crisscross. So paint it one coat down, the other coat 90 degrees. Helps it blend in when it levels. But let that fully dry and see what that looks like. Now, what makes these paints just a little bit more difficult in terms of trying to work on them like this is that they tend to have a gloss finish when all is said and done, which can make it a little bit more difficult to determine if they are dry enough to touch or work with. Now I'm doing a very big section here, so I wouldn't do what I'm about to say. If you're doing small sections, maybe a little dot here and there for stuff, you don't need to use a brush with these paints. You can use like a silicone applicator, brush, quote unquote, stuff that's used for like sculpting. Toothpick, same concept. And you can just use that and kind of gently drag it down, and it's not really a brush stroke. So you have that. But brush is fine. I am going to set this in a way to make it a bit easier to look at. I'm going to get another pipette, and I'm not going to use it for the paint like I did with the last one. I'm going to get a bit more, shut the paint up for better storage. I'm going to get a bit more of the thinner, not a whole lot. I just feel it drying out. I'll put some more drops. I know languages. Just to get that paint feeling better in terms of its consistency. Nice thing about something big like this is I can start off with the bottom and test things out rather aggressively, because you're not really ever going to see it. As long as it's that gray color, we're going to be happy. And I can come out towards areas you are going to see. But I have decisions to make. And that is, where do I want this gray to be? Right? So the decision here is to determine what's going to be a different color. Like, I know the cockpit glass isn't going to be gray, so I'm going to try to avoid it the best I can. And I feel like the area around the cockpit glass, that kind of detail area around there, is also not going to be gray. So I'm going to avoid that. I believe these are part of the jump jets on this mech. I don't remember exactly where they're located in all locations, but those aren't going to be gray either. So I'm going to try to avoid a part of those at the very least. Because I'm doing it like this with a brush, as opposed to the airbrush method for these paints, it's probably going to take as long, if not longer, than doing like acrylics and whatnot. So it really is advisable to airbrush these paints, but they are paintbrushable. And if that's all you have access to and you want to experiment, there's no reason not to. Just be aware. Slightly different techniques in acrylic, different working times, kind of different things that make sense for working it that might not for acrylic. But what does hold true, at least for the paintbrush side of things, thinning it down and having those thin coats and doing that multiple times is going to benefit us a whole lot more than we try to force it to be one massively thicker coat for coverage. Now, it definitely can be. You have to be careful putting lacquer over lacquer a little bit. You can kind of reactivate, kinda, not really, but sorta. So this paint mask, you know, it's a genuine painting style of mask. It's not just a keep your breath out of other people's space mask. So it works out well. You know it's working because you don't smell anything. If you can smell paint, in this case, you know, the lacquers are definitely something you can smell. If you can smell them with the mask on, then spoiler alert, it's not working. So that's a good judge that you have it on right and that everything is working right, is that you don't smell the paint. And I can't smell it, but I assure you, there's definitely an odor. Gotta be careful here. There's definitely an odor to this stuff. So you want to be careful with that. Ow. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this section of the arm, so I might make that gray just in case. Now, I'm not worried about being too clean with the gray application at this moment, because this is the main armor color. Things are going to be going over this or being cleaned up from this to be different colors. So if I get on the hand or whatever, not a big deal. The hand's going to be pretty much black. So I don't have to worry that much. There are two different schools of thought with this. First is do the black and then be neat around it, because should you have to neatening up black is a lot easier than lighter colors. And that's definitely a good school of thought for like acrylics, for example. It doesn't hold quite as much weight here, but it can. So I'm not trying to say it wouldn't hold weight, that theory, but it is a little bit different. I mean, it's just good common sense idea, right? Darker paints go over lighter paints more efficiently and effectively. So what we have is just a difference of, you know, order of operations and for certain ideas on things. So I did make this a little bit thinner than it used to be, because I wanted to reconstitute the paint in the dish, which does mean that we'll definitely need that second coat. So you just got to be aware and shift your painting habits a little bit. We kind of want to let it fully dry before we do that second coat, because it's a bit heavier on the thinner. Thinner is like a cleaner at the same time, so we got to be careful with that. That aside, we'll be good to go. He's getting it and all the stuff here. Another coat down. If you are stumbling across this after the fact, let me know in the comments how my Bane impression is doing with this mask on. I hope you can understand me better than when I saw that movie in theaters and first saw Bane on it. But I guarantee you, if I take this mask off, I'll smell it. And I guarantee you, after exposure to that for a bit, it's not going to be something I want to have to deal with after the fact. So apologies in advance, but safety is more important. So these paints aren't the best for hand painting or anything like that on a stream per se, but I'm not doing this for the best. I'm doing it just to hang out and, you know, paint, make some progress, and if somebody stumbles in along the way and decides to say hi, all the better. So if you are watching this after the fact and you want to stumble in and say hi, there's always that subscribe button. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's free. It's fast. It's easy. And you just might be notified when I go live. Maybe. Especially if you hit the notification stuff. You can really see the difference on the legs here. I'll try and black it. It's definitely a lighter gray. It's going to feel more like a paint and less like a primer cover. Taking the mask off real quick. But yeah, I can smell that. Say the mask definitely works. So let's go back to Bane impersonation. Oh yeah, that second coat makes all the difference. There's different tactics to using this paint, even with an airbrush. And a lot of that requires multiple coats anyway. So if you're looking at this as a way to maybe alleviate multiple coats as a concept, it's really not going to do that for you. I mean, airbrushing in general kind of is different. And we're not doing Gunpla style of stuff here. So we should be able to get a pretty decent coat going on in typical airbrush fashion. I'm just saying, when it comes to hand painting details and stuff, using lacquers for certain detail pieces by hand, don't expect to just, bypass certain situations. You can definitely do one coat on stuff and have it work, but when you're doing something major like this, prepare for two or more. One of the things I found out with paints like this is that part of the reason they work so well with the airbrush is that the airbrush is aerosolizing things, putting the particles and the fumes into the air, so you definitely want a mask there for anything, not just solvent paints, but anytime you use an airbrush, you want a mask on. But in doing what it does, you're kind of getting a better, what's the word? Better adhesion, I suppose, a little bit. It's a little bit more uniform. You're not having it level itself out from brush strokes or things like that. It just tends to work out better for these type of paints. Now, I'm not painting the walls of this dish. I'm actually using the thinner and the paint combination to reconstitute what's on this dish wall-wise back into the paint. That's what I mean by being kind of like a cleaner and whatnot. So you gotta be careful. But it does mean we can get to use a lot more of the paint that's on this dish than you might think. Acrylics, it tends to be kind of at a point and then it's done. But not so here. I do need to be a little bit more methodical about what I'm doing and applying paint-wise. That way I can do just like a more uniform second coat across parts, on that part, and not do a second coat, first coat kind of hybrid like going along. So I'm going to use this thinner feel to try and get things more in line, just so it's more covered. Because I do feel like I'm going to come back into this just for expediency's sake for the next time I do this on stream. I'm going to come back in off camera with the airbrush, and I'm going to just have a nice uniform coverage of the color. And there's nothing wrong with that. It actually is working quite well on the small guy, but something big like this, it's doable. I'm doing it. It is getting a pretty decent effect, but it's just more efficient and effective to not drop the paint section down and to airbrush it. And this little guy is looking pretty good though. Looking pretty good there. So that's pretty cool. How much paint you mix up, I couldn't tell you. right? I don't know the ratio. I'm winging it. That's what I do. But one thing I can say is that if you are worried about waste, then obviously mix up less and keep making more once you get a feel for like how many drops of thinner versus how many drops of paint. And once you do that, you just make less and then keep remaking it. But on something like this, if you're doing a 1/60th scale, which is 28mm dude, alongside other stuff, you can mix up a bit more liberal amount and then have it get used up and still not be finished because, well, you have a lot of stuff to paint. So there's that. So that works in my favor at the very least. We got this foot making more progress on. Now something like this, which um, does not need acrylics, or lacquers or enamels, right? It doesn't need any one paint type. It's whatever you want, right? I'm not doing this because I need to do it with this paint. I did a classic Timberwolf in 1/60th scale with acrylic paints. So there's not a need to do it this way for detail per se. So if you're just not wanting to use acrylic paints and you have a good selection of or enamel paints, and you have a good selection of your lacquers, or you have a good selection of your enamels, or you have a good selection of any paint type that you know applies to, in this case, plastic filament, or in your case, it could be resin or whatever it is for your big project. If you have a paint type that's going to work for you on that medium of whatever it is, plastic, resin, pewter, hybrid, etc., then use it. You don't need a certain paint type. I just always get curious about paints. It's how I discovered alcohol-based metallics. It's why I ventured into certain enamels and why I eventually ventured into lacquers. Curiosity, and I don't want to say confidence, because I am very much mediocre, but I guess being more accepting of what paint needs and working on it that way works to my favor for experimenting. That's a lot of thinner. Whoops. Might need to grab more paint. If you get too much thinner, it's going to act more so like a cleaner than a paint, so we got to be careful. At least that's my experience. Now, if you're wondering the why behind the acrylics, I was just really curious. And I wanted to do Gunpla without Gunpla and get the Gunpla experience. So I did that with Battletech here. In terms of, I already was working on big things, or had the mega project in mind. So I decided to move on past the outclad system and get some actual genuine color and lacquer. And of the paints I was looking at, the Gaia Note stuff just seemed really interesting. Hard to get, but interesting. And I figure that'll be a fun thing to test, because I've seen Mr. Color, and Mr. Color does good, and I'll probably get some Mr. Color. But I heard a really good thing about these paints. They're kind of a pain to get here in the States. So their pigmentation is high quality, it feels like. The color is really good, the color selection. What I really like about it so far in going through their color selection that I'm able to find and purchase um, is that while Neutral Gray 1 and Neutral Gray 2 are fairly distinct from each other, like Neutral Gray 2 is significantly darker than you might think, I appreciate getting some just basic color names. It just makes things so much easier for me. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate certain colors from other brands and other mediums being named how they are. It makes it very easy if you're doing that particular game and you want to paint up that particular faction of which that's its main color and it's named, the color is named after that faction or something like that. That's fine. Or something kind of intuitive like Skeletal Horde Beige or something like that, or just Skeleton or Bone. Sure. I also very much am appreciative of just your standard, hey, this is gray, this is neutral gray, this is warm gray, this is orange, this is yellow. And Guy Knows does that. I believe Mr. Color does that outside of like collaborative paints. And I think they get a bit more fancy in the name because it's a collaborative thing with like a certain IP or whatever. You can tell when a lacquer is starting to do its thing in terms of drying up and curing up. As it gets less flowy and feels very tacky, you want to be careful when you feel that with the brush. You don't want to force it because it can start peeling things and needing to be redone. We just don't want to have an orange peel situation. We can file or sand these things down and redo sections, so I'm not that worried about defects. But if it feels smooth off the brush, flows very super smooth, then you're good. Once it starts feeling a little bit, the best way I can describe it is tacky. Might want to get more paint and thinner on your brush or whatever, or just let it be and then come back afterwards. The thinner will help it out. It's still drying up. I think another coat will be good, especially should I airbrush it. We'll see. I like letting things fully dry when I can. I don't want to get too crazy with it because that's a problem. But we will just kind of use up the paint and thinner that's on here and add more thinner and whatnot until eventually it's basically done. I don't know why I just painted this section. I plan to make that black also. But you live and learn and then you get loves, right? That's the saying. I don't know. Want to be careful. I don't really feel like I'm having brush strokes stay, but there's a difference now in how it's going to dry versus the Mr. Surfacer. Because I did most of this with a paintbrush and some of it with an airbrush to put the surfacer down. And you couldn't tell the difference, but I feel like you'll definitely be able to tell with the way this paint is acting between the two without enough coats. And with the airbrush, I think it will take less coats. In short, yes, you really should be using an airbrush, but also it's not 100% required with these paints. You just got to be more methodical, more patient. Not necessarily use just one size brush like I'm using for everything right now, but it should work. Let it fully dry. Maybe come back in with some fine grit sanding, and then paint over it again. Stuff like that to really work the paint with the brush. That's the big difference I find. But there's definitely a reason you typically see these done with an airbrush. It's just a much smoother painting experience for lacquer paints. But you gotta figure, they've been using lacquer for a while. Airbrushes are, definitely weren't always so attractive in terms of price point for people like they are today. So my point simply is, these paints were around before airbrushing became like the way to use them. So more sanding, wet sanding even, if you want to get that crazy with it, scraping, whatever it is, it just can be the name of the game. For this situation. Now, the darker the color, I do feel like, and I don't have too much experience with this, admittedly, but I feel like the darker the color, the better it'll be for paintbrush application at the very least. Because that tends to be the way of things with color. But like I said, I could be mistaken. I haven't really had to test that theory before. So those jump jet nozzles will get a black, so that's why I'm not too worried about touching them right now, even though I did get paint on them. Not the end of the world. This isn't a hyper detailed piece like a GW Custodes or anything, which with airbrushing you definitely could do really well, no problem. So I'm not too worried about getting extra layers on. And we have to remember, this is a large surface area. So it's going to take much more paint, even with an airbrush, than you would be doing for something like the size of the normal Shadowcat. And when you see things that big being painted, typically Gunpla is done with an airbrush. It's usually smaller detail sections for doing stuff such as maybe a lens or a sensor or a weapon piece or some type of a like quasi effect thing. That's when you really see the paintbrush come out. And it's not always done with lacquer. Sometimes it's done with the enamels over the lacquer. But hey, in case it is smaller detail pieces, kind of like doing that Shadowcat there, that tend to get hand painted as opposed to something big, because it just makes sense. So with that said, I'm just basically using thinner to clean up this dish as best I can of paint, to use up the most paint I can. So when it comes time to actually clean this stuff, most of the paint's on the model, you know? That type of careful usage as opposed to just throwing it out. Now I have heard, I've never tried it myself because I've never been in a position to really try it or want to, but I have heard that if you leave the paint to dry on your dish, then you come back, I don't know how long you can really take, but people come back the next day, put some thinner down, mix it up, it reconstitutes it, and you can paint like the paint again. Now I don't know the particular quality of how that is, or how well that even works. I don't really want to find out, especially because it wouldn't just be the next day, it would be several days. Before I would really be able to do stuff with the dish. So it just never really seemed that attractive of an option to me. But I hear it is plausible. So definitely something to consider if you find yourself being in a position where you're just going to have excess paint dry out on your dish. And you don't want to just clean it off and rinse it out and, lose that paint. You might be able to make use of it again. Typically, you wouldn't be doing experimentation on a big project like this, but it's just paint. It's a shadow cat. It's filament print. It's not critical, mission critical, what I'm doing at the moment. Yes, I want a nice, clean, smooth, neutral gray 1 coloration, because that's you're going to see this color. This is basically, you're going to see what I'm doing over most of the model. But, worst case, what? I sand it down a little bit and try again. Is that really so bad? I don't know. You be the judge. I was at a local hobby town, and it's a pretty good place in general, I've noticed, for certain bits of our hobbydom. Like, depending upon the hobby town and the time at which you're there, they can have a pretty decent selection of, like, Gunpla, for example. So when I was there, they had a perfect grade Zaku too, which I didn't even honestly know was made. It seems like a bit much for a Zaku. But there were some armored core kits, which I didn't even know existed either. And this makes me wonder why something like that wasn't done after ArmorCast ran their things. So ArmorCast had big versions of mechs back in the day. An Atlas and a Timberwolf, sure. I don't know past that, honestly, if there was anything for, I want to say there was a Mad Dog, but I could be wrong. In any case, it wasn't like they did a whole range. It was resin. It wasn't like a sprue or a runner kit or anything like that. But when that stopped, and I'm sure, I kind of understand, I think, the reason why stuff never really picked up after that when you consider what happened with the parent company. Not because they ran out of money, but because they deliberately decided to close their doors. I kind of get it. But I'm also surprised that for all these years, there wasn't some try to see if there would be a market for, like, a true full-on scale model kit for this stuff. Maybe I missed it. Maybe there was an attempt and I just missed it entirely. But I don't recall there being one. Because that'd be pretty cool. I don't know how big Armored Core is as a thing that people are into. It never really took for me. It looks cool. Certain stuff looks pretty cool. But it never really was my jam. So I don't know if it's like, oh yeah, hugely popular. But I was just surprised to see kits. Not that they were Gunpla kits. I don't know if they are Gunpla style or not. But just that they existed. I was not expecting that. Made me kind of wish there were Battletech kits. I'd definitely get one. I'd get an Atlas. If they all did was an Atlas to start things off, yeah, I'm a kleiner, but I mean, it's an Atlas. Come on. Why not? I say do it. Of course, easier said by far than done, so I get that entirely. So I'm gonna let this dry up once I use up the last of this paint. If I could grab this. That's super thin. It's basically done. I'm more or less staining. Not literally. It's more like a glaze or something than an actual paint coat. But, not harming anything. Well, you know, successive coats will clean that up quite nicely. So, no harm, no foul there. Just, making the most out of things, you could say. But yeah, it feels about wrapped up. So we're gonna let that dry. We'll close this off. This will dry out. However, Old Faithful 99% isopropyl alcohol is going to clean up that additional problem. It'll clean up the paintbrush too. I think this is isopropyl alcohol. It's a little dirty, but that's okay. I'm just gonna be getting the bulk of the brush cleanup done in here. And that's a much better brush. It still needs to be clean, like properly clean, but I know this can be cleaned, you know, next morning, no problem. I just don't like to let the brush get clumpy. I like to get, like, this can paint another color if I wanted it to. And that's what I really like about isopropyl alcohol. So that's gonna be, I'm gonna let this fully cure, like I said, just chit chat, hang out. That is a very weird visual. Oh, there it is, of that space. I mean, I still gotta finish. And then do his arms, which I don't have clipped out and prepped. But, that is just a quick and dirty way to do some lacquer paints with a brush. It works really well. This would be very minimal cleanup. I mean, yeah, you can see it sort of on there when I... Let me see something real quick. I do this. And that's not much better. But it's nowhere near as dirty or gunked up as you might expect it to be, because I kept using just a little bit more thinner, a little bit more thinner, a little bit more thinner to get the paint to apply. Or get to use the paint and apply it to the mecha, I should say. So this guy's looking pretty good on where I did it. But I am going to airbrush. First, I'm going to airbrush Mr. Surfacer. I have 4 light mechs. You might have seen them in the prior stream. The week prior, that I put the basing material down on and then seal that in with some paint. That's just acrylic paint. I'm going to mix up some Mr. Surfacer with Mr. Thinner and use an airbrush to finish or do those 4 guys to get them in line. And then once I'm airbrushing the guy in Notes Neutral Gray 1, I'll have to mix up quite a big batch to airbrush the rest of the Shadow Cat, those 4 light mechs, and the 1/60th scale Shadow Cat pieces left. I just want to let it fully dry to get a better sense of how things are coming along. It is going to be somewhat glossy, that's why I don't want to touch it. But honestly, I mean, I might do a super fine sanding here before I do the reapplying of the paint. But you really would have to squint to see any type of potential brush strokes, and that would easily go away with another successive layer of, you know, thinned down guy notes paint. It's really quite smooth, considering I was not the most gentle with the application, and if I was doing it that way I was doing it with acrylic, it would be gunked up detail or really streaky. So the leveling thinner definitely works out well. And this stuff in an airbrush is going to be just phenomenal. How I want to mix it up, probably in the airbrush cup itself, and then backflow it to mix. It's not the best way to mix it. And honestly, probably better serve. I have some more of these things. I might want to mix it up like thinner and paint in here and something like this to a good consistency. Make a lot of it, and then pour that into the. I don't know. I have to figure it out. I got to figure out a good consistency. I'll do some research just because I don't know what's a good mix for airbrushing without it being too thin. You know, not enough pigment, I guess you could say. But right now, the big catch with this paint is that it dries glossy and it makes it hard to tell what's truly dry to the touch. So for example, on here, I can touch that. It doesn't look it, but it's dry. That glossy coat is part of its hardness, if you will, which allows it to be able to take a sanding. Obviously, a really fine grit. And if you get paint down to the bare primer or below, it's not the end of the world. You just repaint over it. But you just do a light application of a nice high grit sanding stick or whatever. It can knock back potential debris in the paint. It can help smooth out any type of unevenness of the paint in terms of the visuals for like a brush stroke or whatever. And ultimately lead to, like if I do like a nice high grit hair here and along here, it'll lead to a cutting of the shine, but also a bit smoother, although it's pretty smooth, if we're going to be fair, for a paintbrush. And even though that's not the final coat, I have to put one more coat over this. So I think a nice minor high grit sanding down here and here before the airbrush might be in order. We'll see how I feel. It definitely, you can tell lacquer when it's dry. Obviously, you can tell when it's dry because it's not on your fingers, but the feel of it, it feels like it already has a gloss varnish coat on it because it dries glossy, obviously, in this case. Now, there are flat blacks and flat grays and flat reds, and I don't know how many different colors have flat, but I'm sure all the basic ones do. Like, this is flat. So, it's not always going to dry glossy. But that glossiness doesn't truly matter because we have different matte varnishes we can apply over the top as a top coat, as it were, and really clean things up in terms of that gloss if we want to take it away and have it work to our advantage. What this has given me some interesting insight, if that makes any sense, is into doing the cockpit glass. I want to do cockpit glass as like an orange. I think it'll be a good spot color to do. I'll add a bit of spot color. It's my favorite color anyway. And I have two different yellows and an orange from Gaia Notes. I have Mandarin orange, which is very nice orange. And then I have some yellows. I have orange yellow, because why not make a color called orange yellow? And then I have Nerve, the Evangelion color series, orange yellow. So this is Ava orange yellow. And I got the two out of sheer curiosity of how close they'd be to each other. So just in the pot, they look really similar. I would give the darkness to this one. The camera doesn't help too much, but you can almost see them to be slightly different. They might not be. I have a feeling they are different enough to warrant having a special Evangelion color series. Um, but also up close, they're really close. So I think it's going to come down to when they're fully mixed, how that appears, because there is some separation in the nerve in the Eva one. But we'll see. So, anyways, my point is with this orange and maybe with those yellows, which might be the same yellow, but curiosity might as well. Um, I am thinking of maybe putting um, a metallic down if I can get a lacquer metallic that isn't alclad, so I can actually get it down on here. Um, for the cockpit canopy glass in their different sections, and then carefully applying heavily thinned orange to that. See, I don't know because I do know of different ways to do cockpit canopy glass. There's different methodologies. I know it predominantly with acrylics. I want to make the effect, I don't want to just be a flat orange color. I do want there to be somewhat of an effect of a cockpit canopy. Like a glare on it and whatever else a little bit. Like that's why I have yellows and I have clear orange and I have clear yellow from Tamiya. It's just, do I put down the metallic and try to get the metallic sheen to help with a super thin down orange? Do I put black down and then try to do acrylic layering over that as one of my last steps? It's plausible. I'm just not 100% certain. So, um, yeah, I don't know. If you're wondering why I'm just rambling on, I'm not doing much else. This is a chill chat create. So I'm chilling, I'm chatting, and I've been creating stuff here. So I think we fill the criteria, even though we did gunk up 2 pipettes instead of just the one. Whoops. This is the warm gray, not warm gray, neutral gray one, heavily thinned with the thinner, and you can see it's not as in your face. In person, it's definitely a lot closer to the base color because it's shining through that primer coat. But um, so I don't know if that will work out well with like a black slash metallic, or maybe a metallic down and like a black sheen, or black with a metallic kind of like stippled in there here and there. I don't know. I'll have to do some research because to have it just be a flat orange would work, but I would like to have a little bit more depth to that cockpit canopy glass effect, especially considering on these bigger mechs it's much more prominent. And there are more to come after the Shadowcat. This is kind of the test bed. Um, so who knows? But I also am not looking to lose sleep over it either. So I'm not sure what effect I really want to have. So yeah, I don't know. But I do want the orange. That's all I know. So we'll see what happens. I have, to me, a clear orange. I have the orange that I used for this contrast staining method that could work over metallic. I'm not looking to go. I don't want to say a cheap route or a cheating route. That's not fair. I'm just not looking to because they're perfectly legitimate. I'm just not looking to go one of my more basic standard routes. I want to put some real oomph behind this project's attempt. So that's why I'm going to take some high grit and sand certain areas that I'm feeling like a little bit of maybe debris or something happened here. I didn't get a good sanding the first time. So very, very light high grit and then airbrushing it. But I'm really am pleased with the paintbrush effect. Like, it's smooth here. Like, I like that a lot. When it comes to the black here, I do think that outside of being careful, I'm gonna get some gray on it because I'm gonna do the around it in that, probably in that gray. But when I paint this black portion by hand, I feel like it being black is going to really help. Um, I don't know. I feel like that's going to work really effectively with the paintbrush, despite the fact that you can still have what's going on here. I think it'll hide any potential brush strokes just a little bit. Bear in mind, this thing will be getting multiple top coats on it, because once I get everything painted up, so once I get this neutral gray one all over it, once I put the warm light gray spots, the rosettes on the top half of the mech, and then its outlines, and then I do these things in like a black or potentially a metallic. I want to keep metallics to a minimum. All of the detail pieces, all the little extra colorations and whatever else. Once I do all of that and um, get the cockpit finished, I will be doing multiple clear coats on top of it. The first thing I'll probably do is a standard clear coat. I might do some decal work with any decals that I might have to add. Another thin gloss coat. Then there's going to be an oil wash applied to the mech and carefully removed. And from there, there'll be another coat over that. I don't know if I want to do a gloss coat over that and then a matte coat, or if I want to just go for matte over that. But with those multiple, and those will all be sprayed for ease, the clear stuff. But after all those top coats go down to do the thing, and we get our super ultra matte coverage after the fact, things are gonna be, I'm not gonna say perfectly level, but you're gonna have pretty good coating, if you know what I mean. So that should work pretty well. Even though these lacquers are pretty glossy, obviously the flat black won't be, but even if you were going to use nothing but glossy paint, you still would want to do a varnish over that just to um, protect it from potentially getting stained. Now these are very hardy, durable surfaces, these lacquer paints. And I know like oil and enamel type of effects can stain paint. I'm just not 100% certain about lacquers. I imagine they can still stain those too. Um, that's why I'll be doing a varnish coat, then the oil wash, and then moving on from there. So I'm gonna take this mask completely off so it's not hanging on my neck, because next time I'll need it will be when I'm in the garage doing the airbrush to finish things up. But I'm really pleased with the result. I wanted to really just show, and for myself and for anybody watching this, that you can, in fact, do paintbrush lacquers, because people have, I don't want to say people do it all the time, but people have definitely done it a lot. And just because we have access to fancy smancy airbrushes these days for pretty cheap, doesn't mean that you can't go back to the roots and use a paintbrush. And that is, I can still feel pretty effectively the panel line. Now, I'm not going for a perfect factory fresh look on these guys. I am going for clean. I am going for well maintained and well kept. But I'm also going for Ilkline era. I'm going for these mechs are old. These didn't just necessarily hop off the assembly line, these particular Star I'm working with. Maybe they did. I don't know. But maybe they didn't. And so they are very well kept, well maintained. There's not going to be any real battle damage on them. But a little bit of grime here and there, panel linings type stuff, things of that nature. Enough to give it some character, right? Some je ne sais quoi, or whatever, uh, is the idea. This elemental, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, it's going to be in the same scheme. I'm just not sure how I want to do that scheme. I don't know where that book went. I'll be doing a video on 1 and 2 of Legends. Um, I really like the Lincoln Osis's elemental armor. It's really, really dark with the gray. He's, you know, the leader, so it's probably a different thing to stand out, right? Or he was a leader, in the 3060 or 3050s. But I don't know if I want to try and do that on this guy. The big thing is, I don't know how well the top half being Jaguar spotted, in other words, that's going to work. I don't know if I want to kind of not do the inverse, but I don't know if I want to how I want to apply the rosettes. I have an idea, so I think I'll still do this guy, the same base coat color in airbrush form once I get there. The priority is going to be the 4 light mechs to get them base coated. That way, when it's time to do the neutral gray 1 primer coat, not primer, but coat on the shadow cats here, I can do the other guys alongside it. This fire moth, I'm filming slowly as like a model thing, right? A video for its progress, a painting video for the fire moth. It's gonna get done purely by hand. It's small enough. I know I can do that. Proof of concept was here, more or less. I will say that I don't know when that video is gonna come out. I'm still working on it. Clearly, it's not done. But when I do make progress on the fire moth, it'll be in chunks, and we'll maybe eventually take it past everything else. Maybe even be potentially the first thing fully done. Once I want to sit, because I want to sit down and get it done. I will say, a little behind the scenes, I was playing around with some camera concepts and angles a little bit. So you're gonna have like kind of the same camera angle for a little bit, but super up close, some random cuts here and there, really fiddling with it. But I have a setup, and you'll know, and I'll be saying it in there, that I'm gonna stay with more or less to be doing paint videos like that. So fire moth is how I'm gonna cut my teeth with that. So this is still in the Mr. Surfacer. One thing I do gotta figure out, maybe we can do that here, is basing. So obviously I'm not gonna leave it just in the brown like this. I'm just not sure how I want to put stuff over that. I'm thinking a dry brush. So I'm thinking, all right, hear me out. Let me know if you made it this far in the comments. But hear me out. I'm thinking of a dry brush of like a light, super light tan, like a beige, and then like a very, very light dry brush of white over that for the base. Then I'm thinking about, I have a gray contrast, right? Basically like a speed paint. I have the gray contrast paint. I'm thinking about maybe thinning that just a little bit with contrast medium for better flowitude, and applying that to the base, not too thick, but just enough to kind of tinge it grayish, the brown and stuff a little bit gray, and then over that a somewhat liberal amount of this oil wash. And I'm not even going to clear coat it. I'm just going to, well, maybe I will. Maybe I'll do that and then do the whole, and then do this oil wash alongside the rest. Maybe I won't. Um, and then that'll be that. And then for the base, I don't know. I want it to not be just straight up normal desert, nor I want it to be normal dirt. I'm not looking to do an urban because the mech's gray. I don't want gray base for it to blend in, but I want it to be easy enough to have like a facility or settlement right around where this mech is. So I want to figure it out. I have to look up some basing ideas. I've done plenty of bases before. Uh, I've done it on mechs. My classic Battlemaster has a standard, pretty good base. You know, nothing crazy. Um, I'm just, I just wanted to be a little bit more alien. Not because they're alien like that, because I don't want them to be on Earth. What I might do, I'll look up New Home. I'll look up what New Home is described as that's Smoke Jaguar's world now. Uh, their new home is New Home, and I'll see what that is before I do anything to go over the brown. Um, I still might do that effect I was talking about, the dry brushing and then the gray over this thing to see how that looks. Um, since it's for a Space Marine, why not? I feel like I lost more of the modeling flock than I wanted in painting this guy up like this, but that's okay. Um, Once I figure out what I want to do for the base, then that'll be great because once the mechs are at that stage, if it does require um, sealing, do any type of oil wash on the base itself, then I'll know. But obviously, I'm not going to do anything with the base while I'm doing like sloppy painting. And by sloppy painting, I mean like putting the paint down by hand on this fire moth or airbrushing the grays onto these mechs. Honestly, the airbrushing is gonna more is once this mech is fully this 160 scale, 28mm scale Shadowcat is fully um, colored, I guess you could say, with the neutral gray one. It's gonna be hand painting time because, quite frankly, I won't be able to do anything else with the airbrush, with the exception of those sealing it, like I said. But once these legs get that neutral gray, the legs are gonna be basically done. I might do the legs after everything gets the neutral gray on the Shadowcat here. I might do the legs in their own video or own stream, I should say, because from there it'll be replicating detail colors, and it'll be picking out certain details like the jump jets here, maybe some of the hinges of the joints here. Um, Picking out things nice and clean, but not doing any shading yet. It's going to look kind of weird because that's what the oil wash is for. But I can pick out the legs the way I want to, and then they'll be ready for getting sealed and doing the oil wash. Like the legs might be the first thing fully finished. So that'd be kind of crazy. I might focus on the legs to get them finished, and then utilize the legs for basing because yes, to kind of wrap things up in this chat portion of C3 chill chat create, I do want to base these 28mm mechs, um, and I think I have an idea of what to do for base. I don't know how big the footprint or the stance is going to be for the heaviest mech in this star, which could complicate things because it's going to be the last mech I do. I think it should be okay because here let's do some calculations to figure things out. Pay no man, don't worry about the Gilgoog. That thing will get worked on probably Sunday. Um, So I have measuring tape here. The thing I found is going to be like 8 by 9 inches more or less. So if we put at its widest point here, we are at like 5.5 inches or so wide with the feet. I don't care if the arms overextend a little bit. I mean, that is just how mechs do. And you can see like on the Shadow Cat, it's not fully encapsulated by its base. I would like that to be the case for the big guys, but I don't think the biggest mech is going to be wider than 9 inches in terms of its footprint, right? Standing on the base. So I think I'll be okay to get what I found. And then it's just going to be a case of figuring out what to do for the base, because I wanted to have some visual interest, especially because I have ideas, and that idea or ideas incorporates a display board for everything when it's all said and done. And therefore, I want them to fit in flush with the display board. That's a whole other fiasco. But do I set it up to there's whatever, there's just things to consider. I'm not going to get too off track here as I'm winding things down. But anyways, I want to put like a road in there a little bit. So there'll be stuff for basing and setting up scale properly and whatever else. I really want them to stand out. Now, I'm not going to replicate the base on the small guy. The small guy is just going to replicate the overall coloration of like the terrain on the bases, the dirt and the whatever else. That's going to be the same on my Smoke Jaguar stuff. But I'm not looking to replicate a road and stuff like that. The scale is too different and the size of the base is too different. But I'm just wondering what to do. So I suppose that'll be a video and we'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Provided anybody actually sticks around and chats here at some point. Anyways, that's gonna do it. It's been a long day. I've been blasted by the heat for a long time throughout the day, so I'm kind of out of it. And made good progress though. I like the color on the mech. I did that swatch. It's working. It's working quite nicely. So I think we're gonna have some really cool stuff happening once we get this thing based in that neutral gray one. A lot of fun to happen. So with that note, I'm gonna wrap things up here. I'm gonna clean out that dish. I'm going to clean out that dish, and then I'm going to clean up the area, do what I gotta do in the morning. Then I'm going to airbrush firstly the Mr. Surfacer, then I'll airbrush neutral gray 1, a good amount of that, because I got 5 mechs technically to cover, an elemental to cover, and a 1/60th scale Shadow Cat to cover. So there's gonna be a lot of that being sprayed. Not necessarily tomorrow, but I'm gonna shoot for tomorrow at the very least for Mr. Surfacer. But the next stream, provided everything works out well, is gonna be working on this Gelgoog some more. I did the head last week. I had the torso done back in 2008, and that was it. So that'll be fun. Anyways, thanks so much if you've made it to the end of this video stream extravaganza. It's a fun time. I feel like once we get to the stage where we can start doing detail work, that's when this will really start shining and really be pretty cool. So stay tuned for that. Be more than just this brush. There'll be other brushes, so that'll be good. Anyways, everything's closed down, so we're not gonna dry out and ruin anything. Gotta clean the mixer. All that stuff can happen tonight, tomorrow, doesn't matter. Next you see this 1/60th scale Shadow Cat, it will be uh, fully taken care of in neutral gray. One. Um, it's just what to work on after that. Maybe it's the legs. Maybe it's the base. Who knows? Share your thoughts, your critiques. Tell me how much you hate it. Whatever the case is, thanks so much for even clicking on this. If you made it this far, subscribe. And until next time, take care.